Be specific. Are you saying that ratable purchases or expenses will be disallowed if VAT wasn't paid on them? I think this person is referring to provisions regarding, if you have bought something, you have used them in your business, but for whatever reason, there was no VAT charge on the expense, on the invoice. You will not be able to claim capital allowance on that. You will not be able to take deduction for that. And this person wants you to just say yes or no and then maybe explain. Yeah, welcome back to all our participants. This is us having further conversations on the webinar that we just concluded, discussing the new Tax Act, insight on the key provisions as an impact on your businesses. And of course, I have with me Chinedu Ezomike, partner and head of commercial practicing Andersen in Nigeria. Chiwendu Enechi is a partner in energy, mining, maritime practice, and of course, Adeyemi Adediran, partner in commercial practice. So I've got some interesting questions from some of our participants that we couldn't attend to earlier, and I think this is an opportunity to relook them, to basically evaluate how this is really impacting on companies going forward, impacting on the economy at large. Particularly, I'll start with you, Yemi, because there is this conversation with respect to multiplicity of taxes, right? There is this idea that the Nigerian or the national tax policy in itself was meant to help harmonize taxes, right? And people are very concerned that how does this apply going forward? You're now seeing things getting, maybe again, we have just 4 tax acts altogether compared to having the Companies Income Tax Act, the Petroleum Profit Tax Act, the various acts that we've always had. Having just a single Nigeria tax act, does that solve the problem of multiplicity of taxes, or are there still things that people should be worried about?
Yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction because it has simplified the tax code. Before now, if you want to know what tax is applicable to your business, you have to look at different acts, VAT acts, CIT acts, and all that. But having a single tax law has gone a long way in simplifying the provisions of the tax laws that are applicable to companies' businesses. But like I said, it's a step in the right direction, but it doesn't solve it. I think the fundamental issue is hinged on the constitution that empowers the different tiers of government to collect different types of taxes. So amending or issuing a new law cannot amend the provisions of the constitution because the constitution is supreme. So if the constitution empowers local governments to collect television taxes or radio taxes, you cannot waive that aside by enacting a new law. But I think what the committee has done is to harmonize some of those levies and various acts prior to now and consolidated them, like the education tax, the Naseni, and all that. Consolidated tax to a single levy, and is spread a rate of 4%. So that's a significant step in the right direction rather than paying all these multiple levies. They've consolidated that to a level of 4%. But beyond that, the local governments and the state governments are still, or will still, there's nothing in the act that will stop them from levying the taxes that is due to them based on the constitution. So having those conversations with the governors, local governments, and the NRS coming on board to even help in collecting taxes for those other tiers of government will go a long way in taking us to that single digits number of taxes.
Thank you very much, Jamie. We can only hope that we get to that point. There is this public opinion that is going everywhere also that once the government is able to ascertain that a certain amount gets into your account, it will be taxed for personal income tax purposes. And some people even think that it's new, so to speak, that the government or the state revenue services can now have access to bank accounts. I know that this has always been the situation that, I mean, they could secularize banks and have access to accounts. But the fact that you have some linkages that would happen with the BVN and some other identity numbers of individuals in Nigeria, does that necessarily mean that government will now ensure that everyone pays tax on whatever amount comes into the account? Chinedu.
Okay, I mean, thank you very much. Sorry. I mean, if there's one thing that these new tax laws have done, is to raise the profile of taxation in Nigeria and make people much more aware. As you know, Nigeria has a huge informal sector, and most of the people that play in the informal sector are not necessarily full tax compliant, taxes. So whenever new information comes out, there is a bit of panic. I recall a few weeks ago, there was this noise about, you cannot open a new bank account without having your SIM number. And I think the bits have been the law for a while. It's not a big thing at all. They say, from January, you'll be able to run a bank account. So first thing to say that when someone pays money into your account, it doesn't make the money taxable. However, what the tax authorities need is information. They need to have information as much clarity as possible. So do not allow them to have access to your transactions to see what is happening. Now, if you have huge deposits in your accounts, they are within their right to ask, what are these deposits for? And try to compare that with your tax returns. Now, every Nigerian is supposed to file their tax returns, whether you have income tax to pay or not. In fact, again, this has always been in the law. But the practice has been that for employees, once your employer deducted and remitted, we didn't necessarily went back to the office to file your returns. But that is also changing. What is now saying, even when your employer have deducted and remitted, still file your returns and show your full income. And if you have other income that's not employment income, also disclose that. So the onus will be on everybody to file their returns and disclose their income. If you have income that you think is not taxable, you can present it in your returns and show, so that when the authorities have access to your account and they can compare with your taxes you file, and then they can understand more. But if you don't, and over time, they actually have the powers to charge you to what you call a best of judgment assessment based on what they have seen in your account. And if you disagree, you still come back and explain yourself. So either way, that doesn't have to happen if they come for you. So, like I said earlier when we were meeting webinar, the more transparency, the better. The more information that both parties have, both the taxpayer and the staff administrators have, the better. What the law is trying to do is to give them as much tools as possible to be able to do their work in Nigeria. But also we risk that the tax authorities or certain elements that might abuse it. So if I took a loan and the bank credits my account, it should be clear that, this is a loan, I shouldn't pay taxes on your loan. So it's not like every inflow that comes in. Well, you have to explain yourself, and hopefully the authorities will understand and not drag some issues over and over and over. But definitely, if you have constant payments into your accounts and you don't file any returns, or you file, let's say, 800K, and you claim you're not paying taxes, but you have millions flowing through your accounts, they will be within the right to say, what are these inflows?
Interesting. So interesting.
Because I think it's something that I think it's not something that is new. Yes. Because I remember some years ago, there was someone who got a letter from the LIRS, right? Labor Safety Now Research. And the letter was essentially saying that you filed your return, but based on information that we have, and you acquired certain vehicle, you have this, you have that. So they looked at a profile of this individual and maybe even have access to that person's bank account and looked at the inflows and how they are, and they're saying that your lifestyle doesn't seem to, the return that you filed, it's a bit far from your lifestyle that you live. So you may need to come and explain yourself. I think what this new law does is kind of it will generate a bit more conversation around being a bit more disciplined onto how taxpayers run their affairs, how they disclose information, and the kind of transaction that you will want to allow pass through your account. Sometimes you hear people that say that the account was used for a pass-through transaction. Taxpayers, they need to be a bit more aware of this, and then so that when you're having conversations or when certain transactions are being conducted, you can understand the implication of what may likely happen at the end of the day. So it's okay, and I think I like what you just said. The risk is the tax authorities not abusing that power, because I changed to mention, if I have some funds in my account, really is a loan, doesn't necessarily mean that it's income, right? So I've got to be able to explain what each inflow represents, and then how the document support whatever.
Thank you very much.
And maybe one tip that people should take note of. And many of us, we're not used to putting narration. When we do transfers, or when we say, but maybe going forward it will help, because sometimes you have to remember what everybody is. If that's putting narration will also help you to remember, so you can explain.
Yeah. I think, like you said, we've just gotten to that era where everyone needs to be tax aware, right? The level of tax education has to grow to that point where every regular person should have clarity as to how they're dealing with their tax affairs. Okay. So we'll move on. We just have a few questions as we close this session. So I was going to ask about VAT deduction at source. So Chiwindo, I'll come back to you on this. There are companies in particular that maybe for whatever reason they operate within the oil and gas sector, and then the VAT on the services they provide is deducted at source, right? And the expectation is that they should have some sort of input output, and then they should be able to then net off. But in the long run, they are in that situation where someone has deducted from them and they then have to pay, right? And they now in a refund position. Where does that leave them? And what are the opportunities for them going forward?
Thank you, Tofla. Even currently, before the NC, we've always had procedure with respect to how to go about the VAT refund. But for those kind of taxpayers, obviously, it's a very tough position to be where you have excess VAT, you have VAT deducted at source, maybe because you have contract with entities that are required to do that. You give an example of guys in the oil and gas industry, or maybe when you're working for federal government where they are required to deduct it at source. So obviously, what you are then left with is to apply for a refund. But I also think that in the NTA, that the provision that allows you to offset that against where that refund has been established, obviously. So you go through a process, the tax FRS or NRS, and Revenue Service, and as you've been known, will conduct an audit just to establish that, yes, in actual sense, the government owes you some amount of money, or this amount is something that's been deducted at source. And once that has been established, you can either get a refund or you can apply that to offset other tax liabilities that you have. And so I would think that that is a welcome because currently on busy companies or the VAT, you don't have that. You go through a refund process. If it's been established that you have a refund, government to check. But we all know how tedious that process, can be. In fact, in the course of doing a VAT audit, what they typically do is to audit to entire both withholding tax, income tax, and everything, just to make sure that the government is not handing you over a check where you are owing. And I would think that the same thing will apply here. But the good thing with the NCA is that you then have the opportunity to offset once it's been established. We know that when money enters government's pocket, so, but the beauty of the NCA is that, yes, if the government is not able to pay, then you have the opportunity of offsetting this. So you may not necessarily have to wait that check come. Once that amount has established, you can use the amount to offset other liabilities. So I would think that people in that situation should explore that. I know that yes, we know the challenges of having to go through that audit, but I would think that is what we are left with. The good thing is that there's a process to this. The law has provided for that to happen. What needs to happen is for you to make sure that you have all your documents in the right order. I was speaking to a client whose only customer is the federal government. So obviously they're in that position, and we're having this conversation with respect to how to help them pay that refund. We know that refund audits are usually very, very tough because the government, comes with this sign on that, look, I don't want to pay this person anything, so I need to find a way to make sure that there's nothing to pay out. But we are hoping that in the new regime, I mean that's everyone's hope, that we'll have tax authorities who will come from, who have an open mind, right? And who are more tax administrators, but not really tax collectors. People who help in a strengthened tax system where taxpayers can trust the system. Because again, we want to have a system that improves, trust. The taxpayer can know that if I go through this process, I'm going to have the tax authorities come to review my books from an unbiased standpoint or perspective, where the body language isn't from say, I don't want to pay this person anything. It's first of all even look at the transaction that find out whether the taxpayer is eligible for the refund, and the refund assist that taxpayer to pay the refund or allow them to adopt the offset route. Don't forget that a debt company will never be allowed to pay taxes in the future.
Mhm.
So I think the mindset should always be how do we assist in taxpayers to continue to be in business, to continue to make that investment that they need to make, so that as they grow, the tax payment from those taxpayers will increase and revenue and the government gets to get more revenue.
Okay, thanks a lot, Chimindu. And I like that you talked about hope. So what else do we do in a renewed hope agenda government, right? But it's something we should wait out to see how it's going to work, especially when you look at it from the point of the change in the percentage of allocation to the various governments, the local government, the state government, and the basis for allocating VAT, right? Knowing that VAT doesn't go just to the federal government, using that money to then sort out other things might look somehow to those other arms of government, but we would wait to see how it's going to play out.